before I get started with my video, I am wearing the clothing of shame and the yellow star that the Christians for nearly 2,000 years forced the Jews to wear while they were enslaving them, pillaging them, raping them, murdering them, and burning them at the stake in the name of Jesus. And may those who suffered at the hands of the Christians receive vengeance, or may they be given vengeance upon their enemies in the last days. So today, I'm asking the question, who or what is Santa Claus? And what does he have anything to do at all with Israel's Messiah? Well, when you talk to people about Santa Claus today, they call him a jolly old elf, right? And then their little folklore, he has all these little elves working for him to get past presents to little children around the world. So, but what is an elf then? Well, let's go to Wikipedia. And we scroll down to where it says relationship to Christian cosmologies. We can start right here where it says recent scholars have emphasized, in the words of Armand Jacobson, that the time has come to resist reviewing information about Alfar and Mass, Alfar being elves, and trying to impose generalizations on a tradition of 1,000 years. Legends of Alfar may have been constantly changing and were perhaps always heterogeneous, so it might be argued that any particular source will only reflect the state of affairs at one given time. Thus, elves have had a place both within and outside German-speaking Christian cultures. There is no doubt that beliefs about elves have their origin before conversion to Christianity. Okay? An associated Christianization of Northwest Europe. For this reason, belief in elves has, from the Middle Ages through into the recent scholarship, often have been labeled pagan and superstition. However, almost all surviving textual sources about elves were produced by Christians, whether they be Anglo-Saxon monks, medieval Icelandic poets, early modern ballad singers, 19th century folklore collectors, or even 20th century fantasy authors. Attested beliefs about elves, therefore, need be understood as a part of German or Germanic speakers' Christian culture and not merely relic of their pre-Christian religion. Accordingly, investigating the relationship between beliefs in elves and Christian cosmology has been a preoccupation with scholarship about elves, both in early times and in modern research. Historically, people have taken three main approaches to integrating elves into Christian cosmology, all of which are found widely across time and space. Identifying elves with the demons of Judeo-Christian Mediterranean tradition, for example. That's one of the examples. Another example is in English language material in the Royal Prayer Book from the 900th century, elf appears as a gloss for Satan. Satan. In the late 14th century, Wythe of Bath's tale, Geoffrey Chaucer, equates male elves with incubi or incubus, and they are demons which rape sleeping women. In the early modern Scottish witchcraft trials, witnesses' description of encounters with elves were often interpreted by prosecutors as encounters with the devil. In medieval Scandinavia, Snorri Sturluson wrote in his prose Edda of, I can't pronounce these strange names, he called them light elves and dark elves, living in the heavens and under the earth. The consensus of modern scholarship is that Snorri's elves are based on angels and demons of Christian cosmology. Elves appear as demonic forces widely in medieval and early modern English, German, and Scandinavian prayers. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Okay? So, Christianity agrees that elves are demons. Yet, Christianity adores the head of the elves, the big elf, whose name is Santa. Interesting. Santa or Satan? Now, if you think that that is just a coincidence, Saturnalia that Christians celebrate today, supposedly on winter solstice, was in honor of the Roman god Saturn. And the Roman god Saturn is Satan. Okay? Now, I've talked about how Nicholas, the Turkish monk, or I should say, there was one that came later who was a Turkish monk, who some claim that he was the one. Then there was another one before that who the disciples apparently ordained as a deacon, who led many people in the churches astray. And even the Messiah himself mentions about how he hated the doctrines of Nicholas, the doctrine of Nicolaitans, or Nicolaitans. And that doctrine was, it was the same kind of doctrine that, what's his name, Rasputin was teaching in the early 1900s, and he was responsible for morally overthrowing the Kingdom of Russia, which of course the Bolsheviks finished him off, basically. So we have here that elves are demons, and what in the world are Christians doing teaching their children that elves or an elf are making them presents and bringing it and putting it under a Christmas tree on Saturnalia? Why is this happening, and is it right? Should you be doing this? Well, Paul gives an indisputable answer. And Paul was the only apostle to the Gentiles, in spite of what that liar at the Vatican says, Paul was the only apostle to the Gentiles. So in 1 Corinthians 10, starting in verse 14, Paul says, "Wherefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry." Then he goes on to describe what kind of idolatry that they needed to flee from. Why? Why was he doing this? Because this was the way of the Gentiles. So he's telling the Corinthians, don't do this. What was he telling them not to do? He says, I speak as to wise men. He says, I'm not speaking to you as little children. No, you know. I speak to you as wise men. Judge you now what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of the Messiah? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Messiah? For if we many are one bread and one body, along with Israel, by the way, because Paul said that in Romans 11. I have gone over that many times. For we are all partakers of that one bread. Behold, Israel after the flesh, aren't they, which eat of the sacrifices, partakers of the altar? Okay, what am I saying? Paul says, what am I saying? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idol is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to our Father in heaven. So this giving presents, putting them under the Christmas tree, and saying that Santa Claus brought them is honoring somebody else and not our Father in heaven. Christians' own writings say it's the devil. And of course, Saturnalia, the great pagan celebration of the false god Saturn, who is Satan. Saturn, Satan, Santa, Saturn, Satan is the same word. He says, and I would not that you should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink of the cup of the Master, Messiah, and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of Messiah's table and the table of devils. It's going to be one or the other, folks. And if you choose Santa Claus and his elves, you have rejected Israel's Messiah by default. Think about that today. You cannot be partakers of the Messiah's table and the table of devils. Do you provoke him to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Are we better than him? Well, if what Paul is implying, if you think that you can celebrate Santa Claus and his elves coming down the chimney and putting Christmas gifts underneath your tree and celebrating Saturnalia and calling it somebody's birthday, and you don't even agree that the Messiah's real name is Yeshua, instead you come up with a different name and call him Jesus, is unacceptable. It is just as unacceptable as Cain's offering was when both Cain and Abel brought their offering to Jehovah our Father. So Cain's offering was rejected. And if you celebrate a demon, you will also be rejected. It's just that simple, folks. So, something to think about. Be very careful.